So now I would like to welcome our board vice president, Charisse Burgoyne, to the podium. Charisse.
Hi there, my name is Charisse Burgoyne. Can everyone hear me okay? My voice is a little cracky today, I apologize. I am the proud vice president of our board of directors, and next year will be our president-elect. And I am happy to step in for our current president. He was called away on a work 911. So every year, this symposium, we choose a particular topic to address. This year, we have chosen to focus on the workforce reentry, acknowledging that those who have been incarcerated face barriers to employment that can be difficult to overcome. Our panel of subject matter experts have been hand-chosen to give different perspectives on this topic. We will hear from each of them in a guided discussion, and we'll have plenty of time for your questions at the end of the segment. This year, we are also taking an extra step in our commitment to workforce reentry. We have partnered with Lake Washington Institute of Technology on a scholarship fund matched by their foundation to help an individual coming out of incarceration to get into an educational program. Any additional funds that are pledged today through the end of July will be matched as well. An awardee will be selected later this year, so thank you to Elizabeth Swarenson for the help with Lake Washington Tech's Foundation for bringing this to life. This is an opportunity for all sectors to bolster their workforce with a group of individuals who have previously been overlooked due to their past. This partnership with Lake Washington Tech provides a unique opportunity for a second chance for these individuals, while it allows our businesses to engage in helping our community while growing our workforce. As an added bonus, for every $100 that's pledged today, you will receive an entry for a chance to win 4 tickets to the Who at Climate Pledge Arena in October. So that drawing will take place on September 15th. So if you donate $1,000, you'll get 10 entries. So now let's get to the program. I'd like to introduce our outstanding moderator for today's discussion. Mark Solomon is the current president of the Washington State Crime Prevention Association. He is also a crime prevention coordinator for the Seattle Police Department. A Seattle native, Mark has been with the department for over 32 years, working with community groups, individuals, and businesses on public safety issues and the quality of life issues that impact public safety. He is a retired United States Air Force Lieutenant Colonel, and where he served as an intelligence analyst and a senior intelligence officer. He currently serves as the vice president of the Washington State chapter of the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives, and on the boards of the Beacon Hill Council and Youth Care. He is also an admitted sci-fi and comic book nerd. Please welcome Mark Solomon.
Thank you so much. I was actually starting to blush as you were talking. So if anyone wants to talk about, Ms. Marvel or The Boys, we can do that later on. It's really an honor for me to be here and to be moderating this panel. I'm very appreciative of this opportunity. And I know that as a moderator, the best thing I can do is shut up and let the panel talk. So with that, panel, will you please introduce yourselves to the group? Take a few moments to let us know about who you are, who the whole you are. And why don't we start at the end? Okay.
It is still the morning, right? Good morning. Nice to be here, and we just thank you so much for inviting us to attend. My name is Susie Lavelle, and I'm a senior administrator in the Reentry Division with the Department of Corrections. I've been with the agency for 32 years, and I was law enforcement prior to that, so I've spent 36 years working with this population, trying to assist people to overcome some barriers in order to meet goals and maybe fulfill those dreams that we all had when we were growing up, right? What did we want to do and where did we want to be in our lives? And so I've been really appreciative and blessed in my career with the Department of Corrections to be able to work with people in reentry. And Next up is a fine gentleman here who's going to talk to you about some of that. So I'm going to let him introduce himself next.
Good morning. My name is Derek Holman. I'm a current participant in the GRE reentry program. Graduated reentry program. I just actually recently was released May 11th for 68 months of incarceration. I have full-time employment now, 401k, full benefits. I guess, according to Susan, I'm a walking success story. I'm just technically doing what's supposed to be done. Without the reentry or the opportunity from being released from incarceration to be able to be employed, I don't think it'd be as easy as it is. And that's a little bit about me.
You're doing a great job, and we are super proud of you. My name is Sarah Sitzma. I, too, am just thankful to be here today. I'm the Director for Correctional Industries with Department of Corrections Reentry Division. My career started in 2001 working for the community college system, specifically in prisons. Once I got on there, I really was able to open up my eyes and see what could be done. My goal and my passion is to give our individuals hope and to provide skills that's going to help them transition successfully into the communities. So happy to be here today and excited to be part of the panel and to listen to everyone.
Hi, everybody. I'm very, very grateful to each and every one of you for being here today. My name is Chris Hendrickson, and I am a two-time convicted felon. For the majority of my teen years and my early adulthood, I grappled with substance use disorder, which eventually led to multiple stays in residential treatment centers, various and sometimes very strange and costly detox procedures, homelessness, countless arrests, and incarceration in Snohomish, King County, and several other local jails. Finally, in 2004, I landed in federal prison and found myself in a facility, and they would not let me out. So fast forward, today I am a professional writer. I began my writing career in 2012 as a newspaper reporter, and that job truly changed my life. In 2017, I made the transition to government, and I have worked as a professional communicator for the cities of Monroe, Sultan, and most recently for the beautiful city of Kirkland. Also, in 2012, I completed my final stay at an inpatient drug and alcohol rehabilitation center, and in June of this year, just a couple weeks ago, celebrated 10 years of freedom from substance use disorder. Thank you. It has been a long road. For me, this freedom relies on continued abstinence from alcohol and narcotic substances. I want to just brag about myself a little bit. I am a 3-time winner of Washington Newspaper Publishers Association Awards for Quality Journalism. I am the recipient of the 2016 Washington State Exemplary Substance Abuse Prevention Award for my work as a community prevention leader. I've been recognized by the Monroe and Sky Valley Chambers of Commerce for my community engagement and was honored as the co-grand marshal of the 2016 Monroe Fair Days Parade, one of my high points in my life. In 2017, I became the only journalist to ever receive a key to the city of Monroe from the Monroe Mayor and the Monroe City Council. More recently, in 2019, I was honored by the Ward Roney Jr. Veterans of Foreign Wars Post 7511 with a certificate of appreciation for the volunteer PR work that I do for the Post. And most recently of all, in December of just this last year, I was honored by the Greater Kirkland Chamber of Commerce with the Marilee Dix Community Arts and Culture Award, which is something I'm really extremely proud of. My biggest passions in life are law enforcement and veterans and also dogs. I am known for my efforts to showcase all of the above through my work as a writer and as an amateur photographer. I am best known for my work ethic and fully believe that through hard work and perseverance, I can accomplish anything. Along with vets, cops, and dogs, I am also passionate about reducing the stigma that comes with the felon label. I didn't showcase my past awards and recognitions to seem boastful or arrogant, but only to demonstrate a point. I am not unique or special. I am a person with felonies. People with felonies are fully capable of living fulfilling, productive, and service-filled lives and should not be automatically disqualified for opportunities based on mistakes we've made in the past. I'm really excited to be here today. Huge thanks to Samantha and the rest of the chamber for organizing this awesome event. Thank you.
Greetings, my name is Rolanda Cawthon, Dean of the College of Business at Northwest University. I worked for the Department of Corrections for over 11 years prior to transitioning to higher education. And my roles consisted of working in prisons as a community corrections officer, working at headquarters in multiple roles, and also working as a correctional unit supervisor at a minimum camp facility in Belfair, Washington for women. And so I've had the opportunity to work directly with clients re-entering into the community and working to develop viable plans that would enable them to re-enter into the community. And so currently what I'm doing to further keep my foot in corrections is I'm doing contract work with the National Institute of Corrections that provides training nationwide to individuals employed in corrections settings and community corrections settings to ensure that they're capable of engaging with the clients that they serve.
Morning, everyone. My name is Tierra Dearbone. I am a member of the Klamath Tribes of Oregon. At 17 years old, I was arrested and ultimately convicted of a robbery. And today, I am Seattle-King County Lead Program Director for the Public Defender Association. I oversee the LEAD program, which is Law Enforcement Assisted Diversion. And we work with law enforcement and community to provide community-based alternatives to arrest for low-level crimes related to substance use, sex work, theft, and trespassing. So we receive referrals from all over the community, including law enforcement, sheriff's office. We collaborate with the local prosecutors' offices to ensure that folks have access to resources as an alternative to incarceration for that behavior. I am also a graduate of the University of Washington, and I co-chair the Husky Post-Prison Pathways initiative, where we create pathways for folks who are exiting prison or formerly incarcerated to access education at the University of Washington. I also work with the formerly incarcerated College Graduates Network, where I am a member. This Saturday, we will be hosting the Northwest Graduation Celebration. So we'll be having a ceremony for folks who are formerly incarcerated and are graduating from college to celebrate that success. I have been involved with civil survival as well, where we are mostly all formerly incarcerated people who work to push forward legislative change for formerly incarcerated people, creating access to employment, education, and housing resources. And I think I will stop there. Thank you, everyone, for having me.
Thank you very much, everyone. I appreciate you sharing a little bit about yourselves and what brought you here today. But I want to get a little bit deeper into some things. And my first question is going to be for those folks who do have that lived experience of being incarcerated and coming back out. You talked a little bit about what got you locked up, but what got you from that point to where you are today? And are there challenges that you face or still face as you come into reentry? So why don't we start with Derek?
Excuse me. So for me, one of the big things that altered my mind state was I have a 6-year-old son, and growing up, my dad was incarcerated, so I feel like in order for me to break the mold, I got to do something to pretty much be a role model to him. And a lot of the resources that were available to me actually come through DOC as well as the Chief Seattle Club. I work directly with a gentleman named Andy Ward. He's literally at my beck and call. I can call him at midnight. He'll answer and ask me what I need. He's extremely helpful, and a lot of the things that I have now are solely for the shot that I had at opportunity for gainful employment. So with that, I just strive to continue to try to be a role model for my son, and reaching out through people as Susan and the Department of Corrections. I work with Strengthened Families. I'm losing my train of thought. But yeah, for the most part, the thing that guided me to the mind state that I'm in now is to be able to be a role model for my son. I actually graduated with my AA in business law last year while at Larch, and I've taken multiple programs, parenting programs. Strengthened Families has walked me through a lot of those. I have 14 different certificates for vocational skills that I got during incarceration, and so it's a lot of the minute things that a lot of people don't see as very detrimental to success that I took while incarcerated that were actually behind the scenes that ultimately drove my mental capacity to where it's at now, to where I can continue to strive for better.
Thank you for that. Thank you. Christine?
Can you repeat the question?
Well, you talked a little bit about what got you locked up, but what got you where you are today, and the challenge. And if you could talk a little bit about the challenges that you faced and maybe still face as re-entering into the workplace.
Yes, well, I'm currently looking for a job, so it's something that is on my mind. So it's definitely a challenge that I faced today. But I think the biggest thing for me, well, first of all, really kind of an unpopular opinion, but landing in prison really, that was my first wake-up call. Jail, you don't really spend a lot of time in jail, and so when I ended up in a place where they wouldn't let me out, I was stuck in there. Really not my kind of scene. I wasn't a huge fan. And it really made me curious and to find out if I could actually live without narcotics. And then aside from that, the next thing that really transformed my life was education. I can't say enough about education. Through my circumstances, I was released from federal prison and was allowed to, sort of a test run to see how I did. And I ended up enrolling in school. And I had a teacher who encouraged me to apply for a scholarship. And by encourage, I mean he pestered me every single day until I finally said, okay, fine, I'll apply for this scholarship. And I ended up having to return to federal prison to complete my sentence. And so there I am back in prison, and here comes a letter from my teacher letting me know that I won that 2-year scholarship. And so eventually I was able to fully utilize that. I went to Seattle Central Community College in Seattle, and it changed my life. It made me realize, oh yeah, I have a brain, and I actually can write. And that was the first time that I realized that I could write. From there, education was key, and then, meeting the right people along the way. I had a mentor that took me under her wing, and I'd never been published in anything before. In 2012, I got out of rehab, and 6 months later, I had published my first story in a newspaper, and that was thanks to my mentor, and that changed my life even further. And then honestly, today, what I can say, the biggest thing that keeps me going, keeps me moving forward, no matter what hardships, no matter what diversity comes into my life, and believe me, this year I've had my share, is positive relationships with law enforcement. I know it sounds so ironic from somebody who's been arrested more times than I can remember, but partnering with law enforcement, working with law enforcement officers, being a communicator for law enforcement, sharing their stories is my biggest passion. It's what I love most to do in this world. Yeah, I think about that all the time. And it's just really transformed my recovery in a multitude of ways. So,
Thank you. Tiara?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me was education. I was a first-generation college student and college graduate. Access to education at the University of Washington undoubtedly changed my life, including some of the people I met there, other formerly incarcerated people who were there, including my very first professor in my very first class of my very first day, where I was late. I really enjoyed myself. I felt like it gave me purpose. It was really always something that I thought about as a child. I felt like access to education, going to college was going to get me out of this intergenerational trauma and poverty and incarceration. But it's not easy. Like, even when somebody gets to college, it's not easy. I started in community college, still experienced a lot of the barriers that come with the systemic and intergenerational trauma and poverty and issues that people face. So my mother's addiction and incarceration, I had to take custody of two siblings at two different times in life, experienced domestic violence, and so it was a really tough journey at first, and I didn't do great at community college, but when I made it to University of Washington, I felt like I was really sort of out of that life, I guess. Like, I really felt like I had, like, something had begun for me. I'll also say it was definitely access to employment. I worked for an incredible employer who was a mentor for me, where I met Miss Rolanda, who contributed to the leadership development that I did at that place of employment. So that was, I can't imagine also facing everything I did and being unemployed, or fear of losing my job, or switching to employers that I didn't know if I could trust, or I didn't know if they would someday find out about my past or history and change their mind. So, everybody needs support when they get out. Hopefully people have access to people. For a lot of people incarcerated, that's not family, or family's not going to be stable support, or family doesn't have access to the things that you need, right? Nobody knew how to tell me how to apply to college. Nobody could tell me, how to get the job that I did or the job that I have. So sometimes it takes other people that believe in you. It takes employers. It takes access to education. Those were things for me, and I'll also mention that those things are different for everybody. Everybody has different dreams, everybody has different thoughts, everybody has different passions, and having access to something that makes you feel valuable, like you're worth something, and like you have a contribution, it makes all the difference.
Thank you very much. Along those same lines, we, in this room, who do not have the same experience as the folks on this panel may assume we know what the barriers to, coming out of incarceration and re-entering the workforce know. We may assume we know that. We may assume wrong. Okay, so I want to ask the folks on the panel, and each one of you can take this as you like. What are the real barriers for formerly incarcerated folks trying to re-enter? And why don't we start with Ms. Rolanda?
I'm all about inward looking, and I think from someone who has worked in corrections, someone who was a classification counselor, someone who was a community corrections officer, who did risk assessments for clients. And what a risk assessment is typically I spend 2 hours going through their criminal record and then having conversations with them about their family support, their employment, and really trying to peel back the onion to understand how did they end up where they are in order to determine what resources they will need while they're incarcerated. And really what I've come to understand is that most folks, and I've interviewed hundreds of offenders, most of the folks that I've interviewed were there because of some trauma that they had experienced, whether that trauma was sexual abuse, physical abuse, or living in a household that had minimal socioeconomic position. And so what I've come to understand is that typically it's how they view themselves. Generally, what you think about them is important, but more important is how they think about themselves. And more often than not, they don't believe they will be able to go out into the community and be successful because of the things that they've experienced. And then more importantly, it's having to work with us to shift our perspective and our thinking about how we view them. And getting to a place where we can take the high road and say, you know what, I could be where you are, I just happen not to take the path that you took in terms of substance abuse to deal with the issues that you've experienced. So in my mind's eye, one of the biggest barriers is how they view themselves, that self-efficacy, that belief in their own capacity. And if they could have cyclical support and services to speak life into them until they can speak life into themselves, that to me is where we can step up and engage with people who have been incarcerated and to create a path for them to be successful and succeed.
Thank you. Sarah?
That's perfect, and I would agree. And so often, teaching in a classroom and just getting to understand the individuals and them not understanding themselves. And it was really boosting their confidence levels and teaching them skills to get them to understand that they really can do what they set their minds to. And a good experience of that is telling a student in my classroom, wow, I'm so proud of you. And to have that student break down and say, no one's ever told me that before. So that was just really a big eye-opener. So I think it is peeling back that onion, helping them understand who they are and what they want to do, what they need to get there. And the importance of resources, not only while they're incarcerated, but upon their release. Working in correctional industries, they do have opportunities for community employment specialist services, and we'll stay with the individuals to help provide resources, point them in the right direction, and really to help them get through upon release. They're released and a lot of times don't know what to do. We can't just send them out the door and say good luck. It's really about providing the resources and helping them along the way. And being good mentors.
I absolutely agree with both Rolanda and Sarah, and I appreciate, Rolanda, how you brought that up. I think the description of an onion is really good. I'm going to take that a step farther, and I'm going to say I think we also need to challenge each other and challenge things like media. What do we see in the news? What's the first 10 minutes, 15 minutes we see in the news? Is it positive stories generally? Is it how our community rises together and helps other people? No. It's about crime and punishment and all those other adjectives that you might look at that. That absolutely plays a role in how we see people who return from prison. And if what we see are only those very awful stories, I can tell you, and I think Rolanda would agree, and Sarah, about 90% of our incarcerated people are going to come back to us. And our goal and our strategy is to hope that we provide services and opportunities that people come back in a better position to be ready in society. We've got to really challenge how we think about that in our communities, whether we're at a dinner with family and somebody brings up an incarcerated scenario, and how do we respond to that? I think it's a big, big, big deal when someone comes out of prison and you get that first step, right? You get that step in the door. We don't all start from the same position. All of us sitting here do not start from the same position. None of you out there start from the same position. And I think it's important to understand that, because that creates compassion and understanding. And if we as correctional and professionals do not apply that, we are not serving you as citizens in any better way. And so for me, it's larger than the benefits of what he's done for himself. It's our responsibility to give him a chance because of those steps he took for himself. And one thing Derek didn't explain to you is that he's still serving his prison sentence right now as we sit here. He is completing that out at home, being able to get a job and connecting with his son. He has very strict responsibilities and things he has to pay attention to. And he was also involved in therapeutic community. I hope you don't mind me sharing this, Derek. He was involved in a therapeutic community, and I just want to kind of point out what that means. It's a specific strategy for those with addiction. And the idea behind that is that you as an individual have a responsibility to your neighbor or that person that's with you. It's kind of a brother's keeper model, right? And that it's important to me. If Derek succeeds, that can contribute to my success. Whether he and I met each other through incarceration or not, his success has a direct relationship to me, right? And so I need to care about that. And that's providing opportunities and things. But one of the things that's significant about that, I'm sure that most people in this room would understand the word snitch. Is this correct? Okay. So part of the therapeutic community is holding each other accountable. And so part of his role is he would have to confront an individual, say Rob and Derek are in there. He'd have to go to Rob and say, look, I need to raise your awareness because the way you talk to that person, or again, very simple example, wasn't respectful. So we need to improve on that. Within prison culture, that's a really hard thing to have happen. There's a lot of things that go into that, whether an individual feels they're being challenged respectfully, or their dignity, or just a lot of other things, primarily based on the things that Rolanda shared with you in that onion peel example. So the fact that he's sitting here right now is a really, really big deal, and it's a cool thing. And we get to support him on his way out. I just want to say one other thing to this idea of the onion. And that position, whether or not we all start in the same place. I might look like you. I might have the same experiences as you. But the truth is, my story is very different than your story. And so I just would like to give you a window into a little bit on that risk assessment that Rolanda talks about. We have a parenting sentencing alternative in our state, and it's really, really quite successful. And actually, I'm going to give kudos to Representative Goodman right here, as his support for that over the years. It's really important to the people that are returning. So we really focus on just what he talked about, his son, and being a parent. So we conduct risk assessments for that. The legislature offered an opportunity for a diversion. So if you meet a criteria, you can actually not go to prison and spend time on this program. And then we also have an opportunity, just like where Derek is, where you can transition using electronic monitoring and be able to be with your kids for up to your last 12 months of your prison sentence. So we do these interviews. Part of the thing that we do is we dive back into history, because we know, a lot of parents out here, we know that if you're a parent, You make a choice, right? When you have that baby. I mean, we're all scared to death, I'm sure. I'm not the only one that felt that. But you make a choice. How am I going to parent, or am I going to default and parent how I was parented, right? So we're conducting a risk assessment, and we ask that question: who is important in your upbringing? You talk about mentors, how important mentors are, right? I mean, those are really big deals. So she's talking with us, and we say, what's your favorite family memory? Oh, my grandmother and it was a really important relationship. And my biggest memory, actually, is that we would sit at the kitchen table together, and we'd package heroin. I did not expect that. That really hit me differently than how I've heard a lot of other histories. She further started to explain that her parents were also addicted to drugs and heroin, and that they thought it would be fun at age 5 to shoot her up with heroin and see what happened. I share this with you not for the shock and awe of that. I share it with you for the understanding that, you know what? This person did not have any start out of the gate. Wasn't anything they did to themselves. It wasn't anything a decision that they made or anything like that. They just didn't get at the benefit. So here we are, 20-some years later. She is facing a felony. She has 4 children, and she is just reeling in addiction. So, long story that kind of comes around to the point of barriers. I think compassion, understanding is a barrier for people that return, because we default to what we think we understand or know. And where do we get that? Media. No offense to the media here. Thank you.
Wow,
And I'd
thank you
like to
very much.
shout, even from my own personal experience, when you work in corrections, at top of your mind is safety. And oftentimes you go in thinking, I don't want to be manipulated today. So you sort of take this assertive approach in your engagement with the clients that you serve. And it wasn't until I left higher education, left corrections to get my doctorate. I left on education leave, and then went back to Mission Creek Correction Center for Women to do a conference. And one of the clients that I served came up to me and she says, "You're different. You're not the same person that you were when you worked here." She said, "You're softer. You're a little bit more vulnerable." And I'll tell you what happened is my program taught me the importance of emotional intelligence. It taught me the importance, like I knew these people's stories, but I allowed the culture and the context of the environment that I worked in to shape my engagement with them. And so we have to ask ourselves, are we the barrier? What bias do we have toward people who have been incarcerated? What bias do we have toward them? And does that bias prevent us from giving them opportunity? And so we have to be diligent and committed to asking the question, am I a barrier to this person succeeding? If you have an opportunity to be on an interview panel where you are interviewing someone who was formerly incarcerated, the person has the skill set, the capacity, the mindset, the heart and the passion to do the job, but you have an issue with hiring someone who has been incarcerated. And so you have the power and the opportunity and the leverage to create opportunities for them that someone else might not create. And so ask yourself, just like I asked myself after I had that conversation, how can I not be a barrier? What can I do to create opportunities and pathways for individuals who have been incarcerated? So I just wanted to add that thought on to what Susie talked about, because we don't want to be a barrier. And I think that's the purpose and the intent of this panel today.
Thank you. So along those lines, you've kind of touched on it. You know, both of you have touched on this. But again, for our edification, what are some of the myths and inaccuracies about people with history of incarceration that prevent their ability to pursue meaningful careers? And this is open to all y'all.
I hear a lot with returning people to our communities. They feel as though there's a label, almost as if it says inmate across the forehead. Because you have to disclose it on an application, right? And if you don't, and the records check is run, then it becomes a problem with the employer, because then the employer says, well, how come you didn't tell me? So there's a there's a lot of pressure in that moment, even just filling out an application, just to be able to, how do I answer this question? Because really what we want as people, even if without a criminal history, I want an opportunity to be able to present who I am today and who I strive to be, who I work on being. It's no different than anybody coming out of prison. People want the opportunity or the chance of change. And it means different things for different people, depending on the support that you have coming out. So I think overall, I mean, it's really about seeing people as people, isn't it? I think the other part of it, through work release all these years, oftentimes our residents who had jobs, if there was a theft at the employer's location, they always felt they were blamed first. It didn't matter whether they were in the building or they weren't, scheduled to work or not. Others in their work environment would say, well, wait, this person went to prison for theft, so now I'm missing something from my locker, so you must have done that. And I'll tell you, 90% of the time or higher, it's a false accusation. You know, it's people. It's working with people and giving people opportunities. And you know, gosh, if we haven't learned something more from COVID and the example or I don't even know what we'd call it coming out of it. I really thought this would be a historical conversation, and it's not. But we're all fatigued, you know, and I think from that, if we can come out with anything, it's really about compassion for each other, because in the end, there's only one thing that matters, and it's how we treat each other. That's really all that matters.
I think one of the biggest myths is that people don't change. My first conversation with Derek this morning was, Derek, where did you spend your time? And he told me at large. Well, where did you spend your time before that? And he spent it at Coyote Ridge. He says, but I'm not that person today. They do change. And he told us about the 14 certificates that he earned that might not be meaningful to us, but they're meaningful to him. Those certificates are teaching him how each day to get up and go to work. And that's always not mandated while you're incarcerated. A lot of times it's a voluntary programs. So he gets up every day and he comes to work and he learns to work with coworkers, and he learns conflict resolution skills. He's learning how to dress for success. Derek, you could say a whole lot more. So it's not always about those technical skills that they're learning while they're incarcerated. It's about the soft skills and how to work with people. He mentioned the AA degree he earned. May never have had that opportunity. So many people change, and I think that we all have to recognize that, and they do change, and we don't want to think that they can't. I think they feel that they live with the label, and that's not fair, because most of them are not who they were years ago.
You know, I was thinking about the story you shared, Susie, about the young woman as a girl, and you know, she never had a chance, was not given a chance, right? And this is one of the reasons that I don't like the idea of second chances, is because a lot of people in prison or who have experienced prison did not have their first. And the other thing is, when we exit, we have this feeling of like, who's going to give me one, right? And if I get there, if I get a job, am I ever worthy of being a leader? Am I allowed to be assertive? If something happens, something goes missing, or a policy is broken, am I the one that's going to be blamed? Is my job going to be at risk? Am I ever really going to be a valuable asset here? And will people really believe that I can be? And we continue to have those questions, right? And we continue to think about, like, who here knows? Like, who knows my past? Where can I say it? Who can I tell it to? Is this person going to tell the other person? Am I going to be treated differently because of it? And so it's not just giving somebody a chance or a second chance, right? It's not just letting somebody get into the door and then treating people like, I gave you a chance. I need you to, show me that I made the right choice. And research has shown that background checks and excluding people from employment and education opportunities because of a criminal history does not contribute to future safety or risk assessment in workplaces. And that is a giant myth. That's the whole reason we all do it, right? The whole reason that everybody does it is it pulls background checks and assesses whether or not the person's worthy of working here is because we think that and we believe that. And where did it ever begin? We never ask ourselves that. Like, why do I do this? It's a process, it's a procedure. It's a piece of this gigantic system of systemic oppression and racism and exclusion of people who have experienced incarceration.
I'd like to talk about the myth of incarcerated persons not being gifted and talented and having a passion. The notion is that once they become incarcerated, there's no opportunity to leverage the gifting that they have in them. But the reality is that sometimes they don't even know what that gifting is. And it takes us to tap into it for them to see their own potential. And I could tell you this, some of the most creative, innovative, talented people I've worked with have been incarcerated. I've worked alongside clients who helped me put on conferences at the institutions that I've worked. I've worked along women who were in the welding program and created metal creative art that is on the campus of the Washington Correction Center for Women right now. I've met women who are fully capable of writing more beautifully than me, and I've written a dissertation. And so that myth that these folks are not talented, gifted, and passionate is wrong. I think all they need is to be tapped into, and for them to see that gifting and that talent and opportunities be created in the workplaces that many of you work in for them to thrive and to tap into their own passions.
Good, thank you. So we have Representative Goodman here. Good to see you. Is there anything from a state process level that could help folks transition from incarceration to reentry, and do efforts like ban the box have an impact? So, yeah, from you. Well, no, I'm not asking you to answer that. I'm asking them to provide information to you so that you can go to Olympia, take some action.
A couple of things. I did want to, first of all, as the author of the Graduated Reentry Program, I'm happy to see someone, actually it's been proven very successful, so it's good to meet someone who's doing so well. The ban the box apparently hasn't done what it was supposed to do. Just eliminating the box that you check saying that you've been previously convicted. The decision is still made at the interview. And so I don't know the extent to which we've eliminated that bias. So that's still a big problem. As far as, and Derek, I'd like to know from you, what I understand the Department of Corrections, and I strongly support this, that the interaction between you and Department of Corrections personnel is not about them keeping you under surveillance or seeing, where you might slip up and violate a rule and so forth, but instead to be a mentor and to wrap around you and to do what's important and necessary to ensure your successful reintegration into the community. Be honest, but tell us, what's been your experience with Department of Corrections personnel, so community corrections officers? Are they mentoring you or helping you, or do you feel like you're under surveillance and you got to look over your shoulder because you're going to do something wrong and get a violation because of that?
Me and Susie were actually talking about this earlier. My permanent CCO, or my CS3 that I work with, she's actually amazing. She answers any questions. She's really supportive of going out and finding employment or going out on socials to be with my son. And then I have a feeling, I'm not going to say his name, but I have a feeling that I feel like is waiting for me to cross the line. So there's times where I feel extremely supported and encouraged to continue to move forward and to continue to take the steps and take the risk to try to be successful in certain departments. And then as of recently with this new sit-in, it's like, well, do I dare go outside and try to wash my car, or am I going to get in trouble? And for me, the program in itself has encouraged like building skills like structured day. A lot of people that are incarcerated, when you first get there, there's really no set agenda. It's like, here you are, you go, you do what you want to do. Whether you learn something, you learn it. If not, we don't care. But with the GRE program, they do things such as daily itineraries. You got a weekly schedule, so it helps you plan and look towards the future to be able to set yourself a path to success. So as a whole, I actually support 100% the GRE program. It has created a solid foundation for me to step back into the community successfully and to build a path that I can be proud of, if that answers your question.
As a politician, I'm going to hog the microphone, I love the sound of my own voice. No, the basic concept here is, do you feel empowered or further disempowered? Because we want to have a system where if you've run afoul of the law, you are then in the custody of the state, and what are they going to do to make sure you successfully reintegrate into the community? I've found, and the research shows this, and I just got back from Norway for 2 weeks looking at all the prison systems there, that they empower, they put you at the center of your own life, right? They don't ask, what did you do and what are we going to do with you? But what has happened in your life that got you to this point, and what can we do to help you be successful? So do you feel empowered or further disempowered?
I definitely feel empowered, just from the simple fact is like, with GRE, if you desire it, they'll encourage it. So if you have the self-drive to want to do better, then they'll give you every single avenue possible for you to either succeed or fail at it. It's all up to you. So if you put yourself in a position to win, they're going to continue to try to shoot you opportunities to win, just like me being here today. So it's definitely an empowering situation to be placed into.
All right. Thank you, Derek. And thank you, Representative, for chiming in. Appreciate that. Christine, I saw you, nodding your head on, some of the things that Derek was saying. Is there anything that you'd like to add?
Well, I'm a little jealous and wish that I would have gone through DOC because I was not empowered. I wish the feds were here. Can we call the feds and have them come? My experiences okay, let me be clear. So in the federal system, they do like I said, I mentioned earlier, kind of a test run to see how you'll do, and it's called pretrial supervision. And my experiences on pretrial supervision were actually amazing, and I did feel empowered, and that they did equip me with the tools to be able to stay clean off of heroin and attend school. However, once I went back to prison, I served the rest of my time, and when I got out, I had to do the electronic home monitoring and 3 years of federal probation, which was a nightmare. And I actually wanted to go back to prison because probation was so horrible, and I was set up to fail almost constantly. And so I'm so inspired to hear here, from DOC on this panel, and I've applied for a job at DOC earlier this year. It makes me want to work there to try and help shed a light on the awesome work that they're doing, because it makes all the difference in the world. It really truly does. I don't know how I got through those 3 years of probation. It was a nightmare. And then I did want to chat a little bit about the ban the box. I sort of go back and forth on that, the types of jobs that I apply for. Yeah, it's great to not have to say it initially, but they're going to run a background check. And so it's just a matter of time before I have to bring it up. And so it's a constant struggle of when do I do that? And I've found myself, since I love law enforcement so much, I like to make things extra hard. So, of course, I love police, and none of them will hire me. And I used to disclose in my cover letter when I was going for jobs like that, and I never got any interviews. And so now I've stopped doing that, and I'm starting to get interviews. So and some jobs still can put the box on there. It just depends on the job I've applied for. Certain jobs, and it's still there, and so I immediately have to check it, and it's just always very intimidating. It's always very nerve-wracking to bring it up. I've had good experiences and bad experiences. So, yeah, I think it's a good step in the right direction, but they're going to do a background check anyways, and so you're going to have to explain it before you're hired anyways. So.
Much of what I've shared up to this point has been about me as someone who's worked in corrections. But I'd like to step outside of that role and speak from the perspective of an aunt who lost her nephew to gun violence. My nephew was in a juvenile facility, and it gets at that question in terms of what can be done at the state level. He was released in 2020, and based on what he was incarcerated for, looking at what he was incarcerated for, one would ask the question, why did he not get probation or some kind of community service? So my nephew was released back into the community, and just a few months later was shot and killed in Tacoma. And I did a records request. I've done risk assessments. I've been able to go back and look at his file, look at the assessments that they've done, and what I saw was that people just did the basic level work that they needed to do. They didn't dig deep with him. They didn't dig deep because he had a strong family structure. He had his mother and his father. He even went in and got his high school diploma. And so oftentimes when you have clients who do those good things while they are incarcerated, they release them under the impression that they still don't need cyclical reentry support to be successful. And part of me is asking the question today, would his situation had been different if he had gotten community supervision? Or even if he didn't get community supervision and probation, what would have happened if they still had decided at the juvenile level to still offer him reentry services so that he could reenter back into the community? And so my nephew entered back into the community at 18. So he's entering back into the community ready to work, ready to re-engage, ready to become a productive citizen. But because he had no requirements or expectations, and despite the support that he had from his family, whether it be emotionally, physically, or financially, something still went wrong. And from a mental health standpoint, that onion wasn't peeled back. Oftentimes what we know is that family are not the ones who can change someone. Someone external to the family can. And my nephew just didn't get the services that he needed for whatever reason. both while he was incarcerated at the juvenile facility and when he released. So in my mind's eye, at the state level, we've got to be asking ourselves, is it just enough to even release people who don't have community supervision? Because we're releasing them back into the community without any cycle support, without any mentors to work with, without any coaches, and throwing them back out in the community and expecting for them to get it together themselves. And so at the state level, I think that there's still work to do. And I'm speaking strictly from the perspective of an aunt who lost her nephew to gun violence, tragically and without any reason whatsoever. And so if there are some things that can be done at the state level to look at those kinds of individuals who are released back into the community to better help them transition and re-enter, to me that is really important.
Thank you for sharing that, and that's extremely personal, and I feel for your loss. So, again, thank you for sharing your heart on that. I want to switch over to, actually this kind of leads me to asking you a question directly, Tara, because Tara and I work together, me as a crime prevention coordinator, her as the law enforcement assisted diversion program coordinator, and we work with a variety of agencies, working with folks, many of whom who are unstably housed, dealing with behavioral health issues and all that. So tell us a little bit more about the LEAD program, what it does, who it serves, and who's involved in that partnership.
So LEAD stands for Law Enforcement Assisted Diversion. LEAD started in Belltown in Seattle in about 2011. Or in 2011, since has expanded to over 60 jurisdictions across the nation and 2 jurisdictions internationally. The important piece of LEAD is that LEAD is a framework. It's not just a program you plug somewhere. LEAD is a framework that creates a collaboration between community and system partners. And the focus of LEAD is crime reduction and crime prevention. So our intent is to reduce crime. But we do that in a different way. So we do that in a way that shows and demonstrates that traditional enforcement is not the most effective way to do that. So what we do is we receive diversions at the point of arrest from law enforcement for a number of different offenses. Those offenses are based on jurisdiction, but generally the same thing. The big focus was on substances, illicit substances, and sex work. That was really the focus in the beginning and a lot of what we do. So at the point of arrest, law enforcement can call a number. We have trained social workers, many people with lived experience of substance use or homelessness or incarceration, who have been trained to respond. They respond in real time, do a warm handoff with law enforcement. Mind you, this is all discretionary. Law enforcement can decide that point if they want to divert somebody for an eligible offense. And then the person works with the individual that they took a diversion for, sits down, does a screening, and then schedules an intake. Intake is a intensive biopsychosocial evaluation that identifies an individual's personal goals. And then the real work begins, and that's long-term intensive case management services, connecting people to housing resources, behavioral health resources, family reunification, education and employment resources, whatever somebody wants to work on. Substance use and treatment and access to medical-assisted treatment is a big one. And the really big thing to understand is a lot of people that we work with have had a significant trauma. We specifically take people who have engagement with law enforcement or have active legal charges and cases. And then a lot of the folks are people who had failed reentry from prison, so they may have gone to prison in the past, exited prison into homelessness, still experienced substance use disorder, still entered back into the environments they were in previously, maybe became victims of exploitation. Some of the partners, important partners, are law enforcement, who makes the referrals. We partner with the King County Prosecuting Attorney's Office and Seattle City Attorney's Office. The client signs a release of information that allows us to collaborate with all of those offices and law enforcement. Our intent and the collaboration with prosecutors allows for everybody to try to figure out a community-based solution that will reduce their engagement in this sort of behavior that does not require incarceration. So if we can demonstrate to law enforcement and prosecutors that somebody is making progress, it's all harm reduction focused, and so people are not forced into abstinence and not forced to do anything specific. But if we can demonstrate to prosecutors and law enforcement that somebody is making progress towards their goals and reducing their engagement in X behavior, then prosecutors have discretion to do whatever they can with the other legal cases that might not be associated with the diversion. And some of the other partners that we have, we communicate with community leaders, so we also receive referrals from the community for when people witness somebody engaging in problematic or unlawful behavior that is seen as disruptive or impacting their business, parks, those sorts of things. Most of the people referred to us are experiencing homelessness, are experiencing behavioral health conditions, substance use disorder, and other chronic conditions. We do a lot, we take a lot of effort collaborating with the community, all system partners, including city council, county council, ACLU is involved, and we contract with the service provision, so we have different service providers, including REACH, Co-Lead, which is in-house, Community Passageways, and soon-to-be Multi-Service Center joining us. Did that cover all the partners, I think?
Right, thank you for that. And the reason I wanted to just highlight LEAD again is because of the success I've seen in the city of Seattle. The need for their services is far outstripped by the demand. So as the program coordinator said at one point, we don't have enough peanut butter to spread around to cover all the need. So, Representative, funding. So I have a ton of questions, but I want to make sure that we make time for you to ask your questions of the panel. So if someone wants to help someone coming out of incarceration and going into and trying to re-enter into the workforce, how can they help? Anyone who wants to answer.
So I brought up earlier Chief Seattle Club. They have been detrimental to my workforce. Before I had my vehicle, Andy Ward would come pick me up, take me to interviews. When I actually got employment, he took me to Whistle Workwear. They purchased all my work clothes, boots, everything that was required. So it was extremely helpful. So I literally owe a lot to Chief Seattle Club, but if there was more, I guess you would call businesses or entities as such, it would be a lot better and a lot easier for more people to access this, because they are technically an indigenous person's help group, but I'm not a Native American. They are reaching out to people as such. I'm Samoan and Black. They consider me an indigenous person, so they work with me, and they're extremely diligent and helpful. Like I said, I can call Andy right now. He'll pick up on the first ring and ask me if I need anything, am I all right, if everything's going good. And so if there's more places as such, I feel like it'd be a lot easier for people to get their needs met to be able to reach employment.
All right, thank you. Anyone else?
I think that one thing that would be super helpful is if more people could kind of take a look at the bigger picture and maybe target ways, target laws that need to be maybe changed or adapted. I myself have a pretty unique situation, and rather than getting a life sentence the way sometimes violent criminals do, my crimes were not violent. However, I was given a financial life sentence. And so when I went to court and was sentenced in federal court in downtown Seattle, I was given about $7.4 million in legal financial obligations, which is a life sentence that impacts literally everything in my life. And I understand the law, the reason why that amount came to be. However, it doesn't fit with my situation. It's kind of, there's one blanket law, and then you fall into this category, and but maybe you shouldn't. I've never said that what I did wasn't wrong. However, I don't believe that I should be stuck for the rest of my life with $7.4 million in federal restitution, which, in case I forgot to mention, it impacts literally everything in my life. And so I just, and I've tried to talk to my congresswoman about this. I've made a little bit of noise about it here and there, but I think that sometimes, we need to be looking at things bigger picture. How does something like that happen? And then how can we fix things like that? Because it's just another barrier and another hardship for somebody, to try and navigate. And this journey is already, kind of perilous enough. So yeah, bigger picture and more, Congress, elected officials, I think could be potentially helpful for this type of thing.
That just reminded me. So, yes, there's so much work to do. If you can get involved in politics or legislative change, there's a lot to do. You can follow some of the work already being done. Civil Survival is a great resource. If you don't have anyone you can think of to help right now, or you want to try to, how can I help tomorrow morning? Of course, everyone can donate to these efforts that are being made. Civil Survival is making a lot of progress and also has a team of attorneys that take folks to court for LFO reconsideration based on income, so we can talk later. But that is a very, very, very important point, because financial burden is a gigantic one. Fortunately, mine was really small, but for a lot of people, it's an enormous amount of debt that somebody who's been working upper middle class for a long time may never pay off, right? And considering the lack of access to employment and education for formerly incarcerated people, the likelihood of ever getting out of that is very, 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 very small. So I appreciate that point. It's really, really, really important.
I just want to add one thing to the financial piece. I'm not sure if people realize this, but while you're incarcerated, interest does accrue on those fines. And I think that's really an area that we could have an impact on, right? So you think about a debt that it maybe is $1,000, you're going to serve 20 years, you're going to come out, and that's going to be an awfully large sum. And I think that's something that we can look at, right? Interest on those kinds of things. And so I think that's a big barrier as well.
When I think about what we could do, I think of three things: volunteer, give, create. Department of Corrections has been largely successful. There are areas of improvement, but their great success in many areas is because of the folks who volunteer. And I think you go in with the mindset of volunteering, not thinking, oh, I'm just going to help this incarcerated person, but you have to shift your mindset. I'm helping people who will re-enter back into the community. And one of the things that we talked about earlier was being able to peel back the onion. And if you volunteer in a prison or even in a community corrections field office, it gives you an opportunity to speak into the life of someone who was incarcerated or still is incarcerated. And just that one conversation, that one moment, that 1 hour can contribute to shifting how they behave, how they think, how they act. Like, it may not be Susie who works in corrections, or it may not be me who worked in corrections. Maybe it's you who come in and volunteer, and you can ignite that shift. And then the second is give. You have a unique opportunity to give today. Samantha talked about a scholarship. Giving to that scholarship will give someone an opportunity to be able to go to school. Earning a degree or a certificate or anything like that gives them greater leverage as they try to navigate and secure jobs in the workplace. And then the last is create. Each of you has a unique opportunity to go into your workplaces and do something you've never done before. Maybe you identify 1 or 2 particular roles in your organizations that are specifically or possibly for someone who has been incarcerated, and you want to give them an opportunity. Maybe your organization creates a program and partners with some of the resources that have been talked about today. It's a small step, but a small step is a big step for someone who has been in prison and who is looking for an opportunity to shift their lives around. So the 3 things that you can do is volunteer, give, and create. Be innovative in your workplaces and come up with some programs, some plans, and some creative opportunities where you can begin to engage with people who have been incarcerated, who can add value to your organizations.
And you really just teed me up for the last question I'm going to ask before I open up to the rest of the rest of the audience for you all to ask questions of our panel. What is, or if you could have one takeaway for the business community that is here today, what would it be? And let's make this lightning round so we can get to their questions. And we'll start Tiara, go.
Oh, geez. I guess that formerly incarcerated people are your neighbors, human beings, the people that live down the street from you, some of the people that work with you. I mean, there might be some people in the audience that are formerly incarcerated and you don't know. U.S. incarcerates more people per capita than any other country in the world. There are formerly incarcerated people all around you, some you don't know. So do anything you can to just treat those people like people.
Prison is not what you see on television, because what we see on television tends to shape our thinking and how we engage and how we behave with people who are incarcerated. Remember that some of the most talented, promising, passionate people are going to be released from prison into our communities, and it would behoove us to tap into them.
Work ethic. People with felonies have an amazing work ethic. Myself included, I built my whole identity on my work ethic. Martha worked with me, she knows. Work ethic.
I would just love for folks to have an opportunity. I have left my business card out front. We have a workforce development team, and we are always building relationships with employers. I would just challenge all of you to take my card, call me, and let us meet. And we have people coming into our facilities routinely interviewing our incarcerated workers, and they are leaving with jobs. So it's an untapped workforce, and just challenge you to take my card and connect with me.
I'm going to keep it short and sweet. Change is definitely a possibility with opportunity.
Mine's, I guess, 2 words: tax credit.
Okay.
And the form is out there for the tax credit.
All right.
I'm just going to take the microphone to people.
Okay. All right. So now it's your turn to ask the panel.
State your name.
Hi, I'm Beth Gill with the Chamber. Chris and Derek, you kind of touched on the struggles that you had, and a lot of it was around the probation aspect of it, having to wear the ankle bracelet right now. But it kind of made me think about, not only are you looking for a job and you're going to have to deal with these probation issues, but I was also thinking that a larger picture of that is the credit issue and finding a place to live and getting a car, and just sort of what was your workarounds with that, I guess I would like to know, and what have been your difficulties, and how is that something that possibly legislatively could change?
Well, for me, I got pretty lucky with that kind of thing. The biggest thing that helped me when I was released from federal prison was I went straight into it wasn't a traditional halfway house, but it was a sober living environment. And this particular home had a direct connection with the federal system, and so a lot of us ended up living there. And that really enabled me that, we had people coming in to teach us how to do budgeting, what life skills were, how to brush our teeth right. It was something I had always refused to do in the past when I had gone to residential rehab facilities. I had always refused to go into supportive living, but that house was really life-changing for me. And when I went back to prison to finish my sentence, and I ended up going back to that house again, and it really helped me get my feet on the ground. And I got lucky. The first apartment that I got was on Madison in Seattle, and they were just willing to take a chance on me. It was the same with the first job that I got. They were willing to take a chance on me. They had a different perspective. I worked for a small business. I had an ankle bracelet on when I went for my interview, when I did my first test day, and I got really lucky with that. Also, I have a very supportive family. My dad bought me my first car. The first transportation that I had, I was in Seattle, so I got lucky. I used the bus for years. And then my dad got me my first car. So I got really lucky in terms of a place to live and a vehicle to drive. So.
Could you repeat the question?
Yeah, I was curious, it's to me, just getting a credit, just other living kind of barriers, being able to get an apartment, being able to buy a car, any kind of financing or credit stuff, and how that affected you.
So I am currently residing in an Oxford house, clean and sober, faith-based, but I just stayed diligent, and I started work, I got out on the 11th of May, and I had a job by the 16th. So I just stayed focused and pretty much just kept my nose down and did what I felt was right. And now I'm actually getting ready to go with Chief Seattle Club and look at apartments on my own for the 25th of August to move in. So it's really the opportunity, just to be able to have somebody that genuinely cares about your success besides yourself.
Yeah, my name is Joe Williams. I'm with Overlake Medical Center and Clinics. So my question is about, for those, and this is directed to those who have experienced incarceration. I listened to all three of your stories, and courage comes to mind, right? And kind of different levels of courage that you have to be able to disclose and talk about, especially when you're applying, like you were saying, who you are. So I guess my question is, do you feel like if in your current roles, does it help, like if an employer tells your story as a success story. Does that help or does that hurt? Because, in my mind, I think that, as an employer, if any of you are working for me or working for Overlake, I would say, I want to get that story out there that, this is really, this is big, in these people's lives. But, Overlake has really done something to help individuals. So would that help, with an employer saying, hey, we've given this person an opportunity and they deserved an opportunity? Would those kind of stories help?
I think so, yes. So I got really lucky in the role that I am now that my employer values people with lived experience because of the work that we do. We work on a lot of initiatives for formerly incarcerated people or people at risk of becoming incarcerated. So a lot of folks I work with, a lot of my colleagues are formerly incarcerated, went to prison, experienced addiction, experienced homelessness. So we all talk about it. A lot of us are involved in other things that includes telling and sharing our stories. We have an individual who works for us now, one of the most incredible case managers. He was one of the original lead clients downtown Seattle, and he's featured in the documentary Chasing Heroin. He now comes with me to Seattle Police Department before the badge recruit training to teach officers about diversion and what contributed to his success and how he's doing now. Incredible, because you see him on the documentary, and he was struggling in the middle of his heroin addiction, and he looks totally different, dresses great, he looks great, great hair, great skin, great speaker. So that is incredibly impactful for him. That's what matters, right? It needs to be impactful for others also. Some people are ready and want to talk about their story. Some people need to. So giving people that opportunity is great. Some people don't want to and may not need to, right? And so, so giving people the opportunity, yes, absolutely. I will close with this. We do still have some apprehension, right? I think about where am I going to talk about my story, or who am I going to share my story with? I read about the chamber and like, why are you guys even choose to do this panel, right? Because we're not always treated the same when people do know. There is still that bias, right? I still think, even though I work in an incredible place that values my lived experience, I still think about every person that's hired. What if you find out? What do I know? What do I need to know about you, right? And where else have you worked? And what other settings am I going to be in where somebody learns about my lived experience and that impacts my work there, impacts how I'm perceived. So I think giving people the opportunity, yes, absolutely, totally up to the person whether or not they feel like they want to and need to do that.
From an educational standpoint, I am going to have a 1-credit course, Storytelling in Business. And we're going to be teaching our students how to leverage people's stories in the workplace. And so that's something that we're teaching our students. And I just wanted to share that with you, and kind of piggybacking off what you said, if you share the story, make sure it's done right, that it still generates some integrity and respect for the person the story is being told about. And then just one more thing. I met this beautiful woman sitting next to me over 7 years ago. And 7 years ago, we had several conversations about her walking into the space that she's in today. And to be able to be sitting next to her today, witnessing the reality of her vision coming true, like that is what we can do. That's what we can do.
I just wanted to take the mic for a few minutes because I'm reminded of someone who I first met when she was working for the Public Defender Association, who was a convicted felon, who strove to get her law degree but faced a barrier for taking the bar exam because she was a convicted felon. She was able to take the bar. She was able to become a lawyer, and she is now one of Representative Goodman's associates, and we're talking about Representative Tara Simmons. So she's been very willing to tell her story. But I just wanted to share that story because when I first met Tara, I just went, I love this woman. She is absolutely amazing and has done a lot of legislation around folks who have been permanently incarcerated. So just wanted to pass that on.
I got an idea. Maybe your organization is not ready to hire incarcerated persons right now, but many organizations want to be socially responsible, right? And so what if your organization just took up an initiative where you highlight the stories of incarcerated people who have been successful? I mean, what if you adopted someone, encouraged them, mentored them, coaching them? And oftentimes volunteering doesn't look like what we think. There are just some creative things that you can do in your organizations to get out the stories of the people sitting at these two tables today. And so I just strongly encourage you just to be creative and innovative once you leave out of these doors. Think about how your organizations can be a force for the good.
Thank you. I'm Neil Black. I'm a member of the Kirkland City Council. I want to explore one of these sort of classic intersectional issues. It's kind of been touched on a couple times, including with Beth's question. But we have this, the City Council is undertaking a years-long intensive initiative, really a mosaic of initiatives to solve issues associated with attainable housing and its intersection with homelessness. And but we also hear a lot from our small business community what the lack of attainable housing in Kirkland means for their businesses and their ability to retain, or hire and retain talent. And then we're also talking today about the barriers to reentry, and attainable housing has already been discussed as one of those, but it's clearly another barrier to reentry is the security of housing. We're talking a lot right now. We're hearing several proposals for tenant protections, and we're hearing about them both at the local level and at the state level. And some of that includes banning credit reports, making decisions to rent to tenants based on their credit reports. I also think about background checks and criminal background checks. And so, you know, we're going to hear from some people, not all providers of housing, but some of our providers of housing who themselves are small businesses. We're going to hear that is going to prevent them from being able to provide the housing in Kirkland. So it's a complex issue, but it has this interesting intersection for the group in this room and this topic that we're discussing tonight. And I'd just be curious what the reaction is to some of the real concrete barriers to rental housing that could be lifted. And I make some assumptions, right? As our speaker said earlier, maybe my assumptions are wrong. So I'd just be curious, specific ideas about some tenant protections, tenant reforms that might be really meaningful, especially for the issue of reentry.
People looking down. I really appreciate you asking, and then maybe there's possibility of a further conversation. I'd love to think about it, you know, and hear from folks who have concerns. But everybody reentering and coming out of prison, everybody needs housing, right? And particularly people who have experienced incarceration face other barriers and vulnerabilities that could result in recidivism, right? So one of the most important thing to do is address people's basic needs. The very first thing you want to do is address people's basic needs, which is housing and food and you know, a legal stream of income. A lot of the people I work with, that a lot of clients we have in LEAD are engaging in low-level law violations because they don't have access to a legal stream of income, right? Or don't have access to housing. And so if you really want to think about reducing recidivism, reducing homelessness, you have to give people access to their basic needs.
Yes. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Robert Britton, and I'm the Executive Director for Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion at the Lake Washington Institute of Technology. It's not so much a question that I have, but a statement about the work that Lake Washington Tech is doing to address some of these systemic barriers that individuals who are formerly justice involved embrace when they come out of the criminal justice system. And one of those is around changing narrative and changing the ways by which we talk about those who are, quote unquote, justice involved. And we're using the language of justice involved because just to say that I am in the criminal justice system becomes a barrier for individuals entering into the workplace and entering into education. So it becomes important that we model what changing a language and the terminology and the vocabulary that we use that further stigmatize individuals who are incarcerated or the lack thereof. And so when we began to break down barriers that become systemic in terms of who we give access to and who we allow to share space with us, that becomes a challenge and an opportunity. And what I'd like to offer I want to thank you all on the panel for your comments, for your vulnerability, as well as for your shared stories, because it is very important that you own your narrative. And that it is one thing for an institution or an organization to give you employment and then talk about what that means for them. But if you're not owning your own narrative, it benefits the employer and not you. And so I want to put that out there as a means for you to create the narrative that you are comfortable with, to share it. And I appreciate so much the notion of sharing it in the appropriate space, because not everyone is responsible with information. And so we have to be very mindful of how, when, and where we share our narrative. I'm fortunate enough to be in an institution where my president and my leadership knows who I am and how I showed up, also being formerly justice involved. And that has not been a barrier for me because I know that I walk in a certain amount of privilege in this space. And so one of the things I want to offer to you, my brother right here, is that I know that a lot of us as men of color don't have the mentorship or the resources to kind of tap into the community of those who have done the things that you're trying to do. And I will offer myself up in as much as the system will allow for me to mentor you and to support you in your journey, to be an ever-present presence in your son's life so that the life that you're trying to build will be more sustainable for you and the communities that you serve.